Tom, it is an honor to chat with you. I'm a huge fan of not only Harry's but yours, the Chapin sisters, and the music that you guys bring to the world. Is that a tough job?
No, it's it might be one of the best jobs. Shh, don't tell anybody. It might be one of the best jobs there is. You get to be your own boss. You get to invent music, and then you get to play in front of folks who clap for you. I mean, anybody who tells you this is a drag is in the wrong business. It doesn't mean that there's some downtimes, but the reality is that it's been getting me up in the morning for 60 some years. I'm 75 years old now, and I still
Wow.
get up and want to play. And the best thing now is I get to play 3 days a week with on live with my daughters, Abigail and Lily, who are among the two best harmony singers in the world. So it's like it's hard to complain.
There's an old saying that music brings families together. Is that's got to be true?
Well, I think any kind of doing stuff together brings you together. The arts, going on trips, and whatever there is. That where you can do something with your kids and with your parents and with your grandparents. I was blessed to have a large family my whole life, and one that didn't expect us to be lawyers and how much money are you going to make and that kind of stuff. And so the thrust in our family really was, and not even spoken, but just because it was there. One grandfather was a painter, one grandfather was a critic and an author, and my dad was a jazz drummer, and my mom was an artist her whole life, even though she worked in publishing and other stuff. And so the thrust in the family was to find something in the arts that you really loved, and maybe just maybe you can make a living at it.
Yeah.
So that's why, in a large sense, I feel blessed.
And you, as you say, your family comes from a line of creativity. Your grandfather was an illustrator. He did Robert Frost's Book of Poetry, if I
Yep.
remember right.
And at the end of his life, he did a number of Time covers when Time magazine used to have painted covers, and he did. I forget all who was, but maybe one of the Russian guys, but that, once a year he'd do a Time cover for $10,000, and that was a nice boon. But he was
A
a
lot of money
wonderful.
back then.
Yeah, and he was a wonderful portrait painter. And if I was upstairs, I'd show you some of his stuff. We have a bunch of things upstairs of his. And I was always just blown away by his paintings of real people. And in some sense, I think Harry was inspired. That's part of what inspired Harry to be writing those story songs about real people. Not just that, but that was I think one of the things that we grew up with that you got interested in.
At what point did you, as brothers, decide, hey, we're going to take this on the road? We're going to start performing?
I was 12, Harry was 14, Steve was 11. And Steve and I had been choir boys for, Steve started at 6, I started at 8 in Grace Church, Brooklyn Heights. So we were already performers, and knew how to do harmony. Harry never was a choir boy, though the joke is he hung around the girls' choir a bit. But he but he played classical trumpet and took lessons. I took clarinet. Steve took piano, and so there was always music in the house. And my dad was a jazz drummer who wasn't in our house because he and my mom split when I was 3, but we saw him on weekends, and so there was always that music. But suddenly, when we heard a recording called "The Weavers at Carnegie Hall," seminal record in the folk revival.
Mm-hmm.
Some people call the folk scare of the '60s, and people like Peter, Paul, and Mary,
Mm-hmm.
the Kingston Trio, the Limelighters, Tom Paxton, on and on and on. Were all totally inspired by the Weavers, and the Weavers were 4 left-wing musicians, the most famous being Pete Seeger, and 3 and 2 other men, Fred Hellerman and Lee Hayes, and a wonderful contralto singer, Ronnie Gilbert, whose sound of her voice made the whole thing ripple. As Pete Seeger used to say, we had 3 baritones and this beautiful voice. And they had been had some hit records back in the 50s of folk songs, of Egyptian, I mean, not Egyptian, but Israeli folk song, and top 10 hit. And then So Long Been Good to Know You, the Woody Guthrie song. And then the biggest hit was Leadbelly, the Hughie Ledbetter song, Irene Goodnight. All top 10 hits in the late 40s. And then the Blacklist hit, and they went after Pete, and they went after them, and suddenly they couldn't get a job. Yeah. So they were blacklisted for 10 years. And then they came back and did a reunion concert at Carnegie Hall. It sold out in 2 hours. This is in 1955. And they recorded it. And that recording changed American music because it got the whole folk thing started. And it also changed the Chapin Boys, because we listened to that record all summer long. And end of the summer, Harry said, we could do that. And he got a five-string banjo that my grandma, my dad's mom, had in her basement. It was her brother's. He bought it in 1910 or something. It was called. His name was Harry Forbes. So Harry started playing that banjo, and I started playing guitar, and all of a sudden we were the Chapin brothers. And the three of us, Harry, Tom, and Steve, started playing. And Harry hadn't been a choir boy, but he had these two choir boys brothers who could sing harmony in tune and invent them. So he would always sing melody, and we'd sing. He was the lead dog, and we'd sing all the harmonies. And we got better and better. That was the beginning of it.
The new documentary, shines a little bit of light on the purpose and a little background on Harry. But I think it needed to be deeper, to be honest with you. I mean, it was a beautiful documentary. Don't get me wrong. I loved it, but there is so many layers about Harry and so many layers about what he did to benefit his community and the country and the world. From, every other concert, giving to charity, to just the lyrics in some of his storytelling songs are so beautifully put together. I have a feeling he really saved some lives with speaking his truth.
I know, certainly I've met a lot of people who felt that Harry was one of the most important people in their lives because of those songs. And of course, the hunger thing is what's most incredible to me. It's been, Harry died in 1981. This is now almost 2020. It's almost 2021 is, so it's almost 40 years, since he died, and he was 38 years old. So it's been longer gone than here, and yet people remember him, and mostly for Why Hunger, Long Island Cares. There's even a Harry Chapin food bank, the biggest food bank in Florida, in Fort Myers, named for Harry. He had nothing to do with it, but yet he did. It was his idea that people should do this. And when he died, they started the Harry Chapin Food Bank in his honor in Fort Myers, Florida. So I feel like there's that amazing sense of achievement and a guy who wouldn't take no for an answer, and had a great idea, which was that hunger is an obscenity, especially in America. Everybody should be fed. It should be a right, not a privilege. And now it's a privilege. There's before the pandemic hit, there was 37 million Americans, more or less, who were food insecure. 12 million of those children. And now it's somewhere in the high 50 million people who are food insecure, and children over 20 million. And that's just unconscionable when there's enough food to feed everybody. That was the first great thing that Harry understood with Bill Ayers, that there's enough food to feed everybody. So it's really about who buys it, who grows it, who's in charge of that, and making money instead of being. There's something called food justice that Why Hunger is working hard on. But I disagree with you. I think it was for an hour plus documentary. I think they delved pretty well into those amazing things. The last quarter or third of the movie is about the things that Harry started. The first 2/3, 3/4 is about his life, and what's wonderful for me is seeing Harry in full flight again. I mean, I was his benefit band the last 5 years or so. Just the two of us would go out and do benefits because I was cheaper than bringing the big band, and make more money. And I at the time it was just like kind of cool, but I didn't think much of it. But afterwards I thought, oh, thank goodness, because who knew he was going to be gone. And I had those wonderful times with him. Otherwise, I would have been, seeing him on Thanksgiving and Christmas, and birthdays. So it was, but what an amazing life. And I'm so thrilled that movie is out now because it's so, watching a guy who said about possibility, we can change the world. That's our birthright as Americans, that we've invented this country and it's the citizens who can change it. And here we are at a great turning point of a presidency, which has been all about me, 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 me. And Harry was all about we. We could do this. And the first thing he said growing up with Harry was always about us together, try doing something. And when we started the Chapin brothers and started learning this music, when we learned it together, and what Harry said was, hey, we could do that. And I think that's the wonderful thing about Why Hunger is that sense of not that it's we're going to be the best hunger group in the world and we're going to solve it. No, it's like, how can we help? What can you do? What can I do? How can we partner with people? And that's been the great strength of this organization and why it's doing amazing work and why it's kept up since 1975. I mean, and it's not Harry's been gone most of that time. It ain't Harry anymore. It's been all these wonderful people who have picked up the energy and and Bill Ayers as well, and my brother James, my oldest brother, kind of the non-music brother, kept it alive for that. He was like the idea person behind Why Hunger until his death at 60. So my two older brothers are gone, and I'm the patriarch all of a sudden. That still seems strange.
Well, you do a great job on your weekly Facebook sing-alongs and all that too, and it's nice to be able to feel that love that was left by there's a void here because Harry's gone, and even though you say it's over 40 years or so, it's still a big void. Well, he's very relevant today.
Oh, so much,
even more so.
Well, that I think is the great power of the movie, is seeing this movie and seeing his dedication and his great ideas, and his clear eye, as Bruce Springsteen says in the movie, the clear eyes on the dirty ways of the world. That and it's not going to be pie-eyed stuff. It's got to be real hard work that makes it work. And the movie, of course, has this amazing number of stars in it. Judy Collins, Pete Seeger, Bruce Springsteen, Kenny Rogers, Harry Belafonte. I mean, it goes on and on and on. And all of them, Billy Joel. Billy Joel's amazing. Just talking about what a unique guy he was, and how what amazing work he did, and that's pretty nice to watch that.
No, as I said, it's an amazing film. I just wish it was longer because I just feel like
that's of course the problem with it. With a you only have so much. Well, let's do it 8 hours, because it started off with the first thing we saw was 2.5 hours.
Yeah,
and Rick Korn and his friends did a marvelous job of bringing it down to a reasonable moment and to give a lot of ideas. And if anybody wants to learn more about Harry's organizations, go on whyhunger.org, whyhunger.org. And right now is the end of hungerthon.org, the big fundraising moment every year around Thanksgiving and the holidays that keeps us alive. So,
but didn't Harry one time say something like, it's great to collect food at Thanksgiving, people are hungry, but what about the day after? And the day
that's
after?
The whole idea. That's the whole idea of Why Hunger.
Yeah.
The idea was that the way it started, and they cover this in the film, is I did a Bill Ayers on Sunday night on PLJ here in New York City. He had a midnight show called On This Rock. He was a DJ. He was a priest then. He since left the priesthood and married a nun, Janine, and their family. The two of them are still together. But Bill invited me because I had a TV show called Make-A-Wish, and he invited me to come on his show. So I did, and sang some songs and talked to him. midnight to 1 o'clock, I think. And then at the end, I said, Bill, you ought to talk to my brother Harry. He loves to talk, and you ask good questions. So Bill did. He asked Harry, and Harry came on. And then he found out that they hit it off really well. And they found that Bill lived not far from him in Long Island. And I think Harry invited him to dinner, and they started really hitting off and thinking about how can we affect some change here. And they both hit on the hunger issue and thought, what we could do? We could do a Bangladesh concert for hunger, like George Harrison did, and get all the big stars. And they went to the UN, and the UN was into it, but it never quite happened for a number of reasons. But during that moment, Harry and Bill really started investigating this hunger issue, and they really went to the sources and they realized that a big concert like that would be great. But what you just said, what about next week? What about 2 weeks from now? What about a month from now? 10 years from now? And they realized the only way to really affect change was to affect government policy, and the way to do that was to start an organization that was going to be here. And they both committed their lives to that. And that's when Harry really got fired up about the hunger stuff and funded it himself with his concerts for as long as the next few years, next 6 years until he died, was killed in 81. And so that was the genesis, was that idea that that hunger is, again, as I said, hunger is ridiculous anywhere in the world, but here in America, it's just unconscionable. There's enough food to feed people. And
there's
if you're
enough food to
poor,
feed people 4 times over.
yeah, and then America probably 10 times over. But the decisions of who grows the food, who gets it, and how much money it costs, and all that kind of thing. And really, and you go to it, it's about poverty. If you're poor, you may have real trouble feeding your kids. If you're not, no problem. But so it's really about poverty, because if you're a working stiff making minimum wage, you can't afford a car and your rent and your telephone and gas and food and all those things, and that's really the great problem in America, is that, and why hunger is doing this wonderful job of putting hungry people in touch with food and helping them towards self-reliance, but also working on the larger question of how to change the policies.
This is something that we can all get involved in and do. We should, even if we're well fed. There's always somebody that can use our help, a hand. And
also, a hungry world is a desperate world.
Yeah.
It's helping others and making making the world a less desperate place is helping yourself and helping your children and helping your grandchildren. The same way working toward the environment is helping yourself and your children and your grandchildren. So there's things to look larger than this administration has been looking, which is how to make more money for the Trump administration. Rather than that, it's how do you make the world we live in more livable, more sustainable, and how to make your kids have a safe world and life.
I have to ask you about a couple of other things. Harry was such a lyricist and told so many great stories. He was a master storyteller. How he could turn a phrase is just amazing to me, and yet it told the story in such great detail. Well,
I mentioned my grandfather's paintings, but the larger thing with Harry was, excuse me, he was a documentary filmmaker. His uncle, our uncle, was Richard Leacock of Leacock Pennybaker, one of the great documentarians. And when Harry flunked out of school, which he did twice out of Cornell, Ricky gave him a job working in films, and he started out syncing up. In those days, it was sound, and there was movie, and you'd syncing them up in a big thing, and then he moved from that into taking sound, and then being an assistant cameraman, and eventually making his own films. He made a film that was nominated for. This is Harry. He made a film nominated for the Academy Award in 1968 called "The Greatest Champions." I'll have to think of the exact title, but it was about the heavyweight championship division from John L. Sullivan, the first modern thing, to Gene Tunney. And he was working with Bill Caton and Jimmy Jacobs, who were the managers of Mike Tyson. And they also were collectors of film footage of the great fights. And they had 99% of all the great fights. They had footage from Thomas Edison of the first of one of the fighters. Just
wow, what an amazing collection!
And Harry was hired by them to do these 5-minute or 3-minute greatest fights of the century, and it was on. They were on the local stations here. They'd have 3 minutes on Jack Johnson, and Harry would cut that together and do this and have it done. And as he was doing that, he said, you have enough of this. We should make a film about this. I said, yeah, we were thinking about it. And after about 6 months, Harry said, well, I'll do it. So he did. He took all the footage. Steve and I helped him do the music for it. But it's an amazing thing. You look it up. It's Legendary Champions. Harry.
Legendary Champions.
Yeah, and it's an amazing film. But let's go back to his writing. He was also writing poetry. Sandy in the film says, I thought I was marrying a poor poet, and look what I ended up with. And so he really worked on the word writing, the poetry of it. And then he was writing songs all along. He wrote songs for my TV show Make a Wish, and he wrote songs for my band after we kicked Harry out of the band. The band was Steve and my brother Steve and called the Chapins, and it was like a rock band. He wrote a lot of those songs. And then he started coming up with these long. When he was writing poetry, he started writing these story songs, and he wrote Taxi, and he had a couple other long ones. And we said, we can't do that. It's too long. We were looking for we were then being looking for hit singles so we could do an album. And anyway, Harry was. So he opened for us at the bitter end, not the bitter end, at the Village Gate in the Village, summer of '71. My brother Steve and I and Phil Forbes and Dougie Walker were a band called the Chapins, and we hired the Village Gate 4 nights a week. After Jacques Brel is alive and well and living in Paris, of a long-running off-road show.
It was Jacques Brel. Did Rob McEwen have something to do with that?
I don't think so. I think it was Jacques Brel himself and somebody. Maybe Rob McEwen may have translated some of the songs. I don't know, but it was a long-running show, but it ended at 9:00. So we rented the Village Gate, and Art DeLugoff gave it to us for $400 a week. So. And we were hoping that buses would come in and we can get some bodies in there. And our wives ran the door. So we were the lead act, and we were a good, tight little rock band. And Rock Magazine had called us the best band I've seen this year. So we made a big flag, Rock Magazine, the best flag. And so we were making a little bit of money, and it kept us playing. And then our opening act the first week was Harry by himself, singing these long songs. And it died. He didn't know how to do it. Later on, he could sing any of his folk songs, his long songs by himself when he became such a good performer. But then it was like, and it was a hard 4 nights for him. And anybody else would have said, okay, I'm doing this. But he said, I need a band. So he took 2 weeks off, got a cello player, Tim Scott, got John Wallace, who was the bass player and who we'd known as a choir boy, one of the great voices I've ever known.
Amazing voice, yeah.
And a fingerstyle guitarist who we never met, but had a tape of Ron Palmer from Syracuse, and they rehearsed for 2 weeks, putting these songs together, along with Harry's manager Fred Cooley, who Harry had met in Cornell. Who he was a part of the Whiffenpoofs. He was the head of the Whiffenpoofs, with a great a cappella singing group forever. It's the Sherwoods. They were the Whiffenpoofs were at Yale, I think, but the same kind of idea, a male a cappella singing group, which Harry always tried to get in, but he didn't sing well enough to get in. But Fred knew how to arrange voices. And so for that 2 weeks, Harry and Steve and I was around, and his band rehearsed at my mom's in Brooklyn Heights. And we watched them put these songs together. And 2 weeks later, he comes back and opens up, and it's magical. Now, let's talk about the songs. And the song that made him was Taxi, which is a long 7-minute song. Harry loved writing stories, and he was used to, because of documentaries, thinking of a person often not a very well-known person, but someone who is interesting, goes through some kind of thing, and you follow this story and come to an end. And he knew how to put that together. So that's what happened in Taxi, and then no one else was doing that exactly, and so he started really thinking of himself as a storyteller. And so I don't think he went into it at the beginning saying, I'm going to be the best storyteller, but you follow the open door, and that door opened, and then he just really went after it. Mr. Tanner, you can go down to, and what's the one? Oh, John Joseph, Corey's Coming.
Yeah, Corey's Coming.
There's so many great songs, but he really then began to seek that, because he said that makes me, I want to do something different from anybody else. Sandy in the documentary says an interesting thing. She said, he once said to me, if it has to be me doing something on the head of a pin that no one else has done before, I want to do something that no one else has done before. And I think that's when he saw the storytelling thing, he said. And if you think about it, we were steeped in that already with the Weavers, and we were steeped in American folk music, which comes from all over the world, but a lot of it's the ballad tradition, where story verse, singable chorus, story chorus, story chorus. And so he was used to that, and he enlarged it, because it wasn't. But that was where he came from. He was, in a sense, he was built to do this.
In our final moments together, and again, I do want to circle back and say, the Harry Chapin documentary, When in Doubt, Do Something, is available on all streaming services now, I believe.
I think it is.
Well worth to see. As I said before, I keep reiterating this because I didn't want you to get the wrong idea. It needs to be longer. I mean, it really is an involving documentary. But the legacy that not only Harry left, but the Chapin brothers and all of that, all that fun on stage, it sucks, Harry, and all of that is still. I saw a guy wearing a T-shirt that said that about 2 years ago at the Four Seasons in L.A.
Really, that's funny. That's funny.
We kind of recognize Harry Chapin fans by just little things like that. Is there any music that's left unpublished, undone?
Not really. Harry was nothing if not prolific, but also just get it out there. Sometimes he wasn't his own best editor. I always felt that if he took a little more time, his best stuff is is fabulous. And Taxi, Cats in the Cradle, some of Mr. Tanner, Story of a Life. There's some of his best stuff is as good as anybody's, but some of it. Felt to me like if he hadn't been so busy doing other stuff, he might have worked a little harder at it. But I think most of what's there is what's out is what's out. It's not like Prince or somebody who was in the studio all the time doing his own, years and years of recording. Harry, when he had something, he'd record it and put it out,
It still touches me. I mean, I think I've got everything ever recorded by Harry Chapin and the Chapin brothers, and it just speaks to me, because as I was getting older, I heard different songs that meant something to that time of my life. It was like a ladder, every rung had a Harry Chapin song to it. So I am so honored to spend this time with you, Tom. It is
well, thanks,
an amazing moment. I know that you travel. Corona has put the kibosh on that for a little bit, but will you ever come out this way? I can't remember anybody coming out to Salt Lake.
I've got, every year for the last 30 years, I've come to Phoenix and played Arizona, but there's never been a gig that I had up in Salt Lake. I'd love to come. We come January, February, used to be March. And I when it was late March, it was perfect because Bonnie and I come in a week early and go to the parks. We go to Zion and the Grand Canyon. In Zion, you could right at the beginning of March, you could go into the cabin, the place right in Zion. You could drive in. Oh my gosh!
Yeah.
So I love that part of the country. It's and I would love to come. Who knows what's happening now? If your listeners watchers want to see us Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, I do 11 o'clock in the morning. TomChapin.tv. TV is how to find us on Facebook and on Instagram.
Sure.
We do a half hour of family music. This morning we did a whole bunch of stuff on dreams, and we often do on Harry's birthday we did 2 days of just Harry's songs.
That just passed a couple days ago.
December 7th.
Yeah.
Would have been his 78th birthday,
Yeah.
and we still miss him. But there's the other people you want to check out is Harry's daughter Jen, who is an amazing singer-songwriter, and my daughters. And we just did a benefit concert for Tarrytown Music Hall, which is up on their website, Tarrytown Music Hall in New York City, in Tarrytown, New York. And it's a little over an hour that my daughters and I singing. And I think I actually did Taxi with my daughters singing John Wallace's high part. So you can
What a
check
great
that
falsetto
out.
John Wallace had.
Oh my goodness. Well, I got to tell you about John. He was a couple of years older than me. And when I got into choir, I was 8 and he was like 9 or 10. And he was the best choir boy soprano I ever heard. And they were boy soprano solos. And everybody else would be a little bit scared and stuff. And John would just get up there and this amazing voice would come out. He was just astonishing. And he also would do doo-wop down in the basement with his boys, because he was a real Brooklyn guy, and is and one of the most lovely people in the world. But what an amazing talent, and he's the one who of all Harry's bandmates that became the famous one, because he did Fall on Your Knees in Mr. Tanner, and he did Baby is so high that she's skying. Well,
those are so iconic, especially, around this time of year. Mr. Tanner, that story is just a lovely, lovely story. And yet it ends with such hope. It ends with such a feeling of
sure.
Dreams never die.
Did you if you check on YouTube, look for Mr. Tanner, Martin Turbiddy, and there's a concert. Howie Fields, Harry's drummer, looked up Martin Turbiddy and found him. He's alive and still singing, and he lives in Connecticut. Never was in Dayton, Ohio, and we got to talk to him, and he came and was gonna just stand up and say hello, but he came on the night that John Wallace had just had a hip replacement, and the only show that John Wallace didn't play. This is 2 years ago with the Chapin family, with all Steve and the band and myself and my daughters and Harry's daughter, they were and so Martin came, and we asked if he'd sing the part. Actually, we asked him a week ahead because we knew John was going to be there, and he said yes, and that's you'll find a tape that's an amazing moment. I
will look for it. I promise.
Yeah, Martin Turbiddy.
Tom, thank you so much. You gave me more time than I could ever expect, and I gobbled it up.
Tony, a pleasure, man. Be well and stay safe. And it looks like we're maybe turning the corner here, but it's going to be a while yet. So stay safe.
This celebrity interview is sponsored by...
I'm Annette Civarella with Pia Anderson Moss Hoyt, Utah's leading entertainment law firm, serving clients nationwide. We provide solid, attentive representation focusing on minimizing risk, reducing cost, and protecting the reputation and privacy of our clients. Our goal is to provide you with the legal representation you need to make the right decisions and to protect you and your creative works. Call or email me for a free consultation.